It's funny how a smell can time travel you faster than any airplane. I was walking back from the diner this morning, coffee in one hand, half-eaten cruller in the other, when I passed this guy working on his old '72 Charger. The second I caught a whiff of oil, rubber, and vinyl seats in the sun, boom, I was 19 again, barefoot in a dirt driveway in Berkeley, watching my best friend Danny light up a joint like it was a sacred ritual. The '70s weren't just wild, they were unhinged. Not in the way your uncle brags about, but in the way every day felt like it might blow your life open in some beautiful or terrifying way. I lived in a drafty Victorian with 3 roommates and a dog we didn't technically own. We named him Grover. Grover belonged to the neighborhood, he just liked our couch best. I was supposed to be studying architecture, but between protests, concerts, and trying to decode the latest Bowie album, I barely made it to class. Love was free, weed was cheap, and everyone smelled like patchouli and hope. But what I really remember, what still sits in my chest when I hear a door's track or see someone in a denim vest? Danny. He wasn't my roommate, though he might as well have been. He was always at our place, climbing in through the kitchen window like it was his own damn house. He said the front door had bad vibes. He had those black curls that always looked like he just rolled out of bed, probably because he had, and these long limbs that made him seem like he could stretch across a whole room without trying. People gravitated toward him like he had his own gravity. I didn't. I watched him. Quietly. Sketchbook in my lap, pretending to capture energy or movement or some other artsy excuse, but really, I was just trying to find a way to hold on to him. He knew. I think he always knew. There was a night in June, '75. Everything was sticky and loud. Someone had Zeppelin cranked up on a busted boombox, and the whole house was swaying like it might lift off the foundation. I'd escaped to the roof with my sketchbook, shirtless, legs dangling over the ledge. Danny climbed out the bathroom window, barefoot, carrying 2 warm, rolling rocks and a grin that said he didn't believe in consequences. "You always drawing something?" he said, dropping beside me. "Helps me make sense of the noise," I muttered. "You ever draw me?" I kept my eyes on the page. "Maybe." He leaned in. Our knees touched, my heart tripped. Then, without asking, he took the book, flipped through it slowly until he found the page I hoped he wouldn't. Him, sleeping on our couch, shirtless, a shaft of morning light cutting across his chest. I'd drawn him like I saw him, soft and alive and unreal. He didn't laugh. Didn't say anything for a minute. Then he looked at me and said, "I like it. Didn't know you saw me like that." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "I do," I finally said. Quiet, like it was some sacred truth I wasn't supposed to say out loud. Danny just nodded. Then he stood up and climbed back inside. But something shifted that night, and the rest of that summer? Let's just say, things got even crazier from there. After that night on the roof, everything between Danny and me changed, but not in any way I could explain easily. He didn't avoid me. He didn't even act weird about it. In fact, he started showing up even more. Mornings with coffee in one hand, sunglasses still on, hair a wreck. Nights where he'd crash on the floor next to my bed instead of the couch, claiming the springs in it were killing his back. He never said a word about the sketch again, but I'd catch him watching me, not in a creepy way, just watching, like he was trying to figure something out. And I didn't dare ask what, I just let it keep happening. Because as long as he kept showing up, I could pretend I wasn't completely losing it over him. That summer was hot. Not just the weather, though, yeah, it was one of those dry California summers where everything feels like it's on the verge of catching fire. But the tension. Me, Danny, the city. Everyone felt electric and a little reckless. You'd walk down Telegraph, and it was like every person was on their own trip, their own rebellion. Danny and I spent entire afternoons sprawled on the roof, passing a joint back and forth and making up stories about the people walking by below. He'd say things like, "That guy's definitely running from the law," or "She's in a band, has to be. Plays bass, left-handed." And I'd laugh like my ribs couldn't hold it in. And then sometimes, in those long silences when the sun was setting and the world turned gold, I'd feel his foot graze mine, and neither of us would move it away. One night, we ended up at a friend of a friend's party, One of those wild, packed to the rafters things with incense burning and people sitting cross-legged in corners doing tarot. I lost track of Danny somewhere around hour 2, after a bottle of wine and a shot of something that tasted like regret. I found him later in the kitchen, arguing with some guy about Dylan versus Neil Young, gesturing wildly, a beer in one hand and that crinkle in his nose when he got passionate. He saw me in the doorway and his whole face changed, lit up. "There he is," he said, breaking off mid-sentence and crossing the room like I was the only person there. "Thought I lost you," I said, trying to sound casual. I was never good at casual. Danny just grinned. "Never." We walked home that night, both a little drunk, shoulders bumping every few steps. He was rambling about something, how maybe he wanted to leave school, how maybe all this wasn't what he wanted. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. And then, out of nowhere, he asked, "You ever think about just disappearing?" I glanced at him. "Like start over?" "Yeah, just leave all of this. Find somewhere quiet. Live by a lake, build a cabin, no labels, no bullshit." I laughed. "You'd go nuts after 2 days without a record store," he grinned. "True, but maybe you'd be there to keep me sane." That stopped me. Cold. I looked at him, really looked at him, and there was something different in his face, like he was daring me to see it. We didn't say anything else the whole walk home. But that night, he didn't sleep on the couch. He followed me into my room. And he didn't leave. Not that night. Not for the next 4. Danny never talked about those nights. Not the way I did in my head. Over and over, like a favorite record I couldn't stop playing. I'd wake up to the sound of the city outside, the early buses, the pigeons fighting over crumbs, and there he'd be. Next to me, bare chest rising and falling with sleep, curls flattened on one side, an arm slung lazily across my waist like he had every right to it. And for a while, it felt like maybe he did. But daylight has this annoying way of making things complicated. He'd slip out of bed before the roommates woke up, and we'd fall back into our usual rhythm, laughing, sharing joints, arguing about music like nothing had shifted. Like I didn't know the shape of the mole on his hip, or the exact sound he made when I kissed the base of his throat. He never touched me in front of anyone, never looked at me too long in public. But in private, he was all heat and need and whispers so soft I wasn't sure I hadn't imagined them. I told myself not to ask questions, not to push. I told myself to just take what I could get and be grateful, but that only worked for so long. One night in late July, I couldn't sleep. Too hot, too many thoughts. I crept out to the backyard, sat on the busted lawn chair under the avocado tree, and lit a cigarette I didn't really want. Danny came out a few minutes later, shirtless, barefoot, hair a mess. "You good?" he asked, sitting beside me. I shrugged. "Yeah, just thinking." He was quiet a minute. Then, about what? I hesitated. I could have lied. Could have said something vague about school or life or politics. But I didn't. "You." His shoulders stiffened slightly. Just a flicker. But I saw it. "I don't know what this is," I said. "I don't know what we're doing. But I need to know if it's just in my head." He didn't answer at first, just looked out into the night. The silence stretched long and taut. Finally he said, "I don't know what it is either." "But it's something," I pressed. He nodded. Slowly. "Yeah, it's something." Then he leaned over and kissed me. Not like before, not drunk, not rushed, not like a secret being smuggled in the dark. This kiss was different, like he needed me to understand something without the words. We stayed out there for a long time, just sitting, his leg pressed against mine, the stars overhead, the hum of the city still pulsing behind the fence. He didn't spend the night in my bed that time. He stayed in the chair, next to me, until the sun came up. And somehow, that meant more. After that night on the lawn chair, things didn't explode. They didn't fall apart either. They just settled into this strange, charged rhythm. Like we were both holding something fragile between us and didn't know how to name it, let alone carry it. Danny didn't stop coming over. If anything, he was around more. But he also didn't stop sleeping with girls. Not often, but enough that it felt like a slap when I'd hear it from someone else. A friend of a friend saw him at a bar, some girl on his arm. A story passed around the table like bad gossip, and every time I'd nod like I didn't care, like I hadn't memorized the feel of his hands and the sound of his laugh in the dark. He never talked about them, not to me. One night, we were stoned out of our minds, sprawled on the living room floor with a bag of Doritos between us. Everyone else was out or asleep. Zeppelin was on the stereo, low and slow, and the lights were off except for a flickering candle on the windowsill. You ever think about how different we'll be in 10 years? Danny asked, his voice thick with smoke and sleep. I rolled onto my side to look at him. Different how? I don't know, like, what if we're not even friends anymore? The question hit me harder than I expected. Why wouldn't we be? He shrugged. People change, move, get jobs, get married, forget each other. I stared at him. You think I'd forget you? He didn't answer, just looked at me, eyes a little glassy. Then he reached for my hand. Not in a way that felt sexual, just like he needed it. I don't want to forget any of this, he whispered, and I knew what he meant. The summer, the haze, the heat, us. Even if we never defined it. There was one night in August, close to the end. We took a day trip up to Point Reyes. Just the two of us. No plan. Just a thermos of bad coffee, a joint tucked behind his ear, and my old camera slung around my neck. We hiked out to the cliffs, the ocean stretching out like some endless promise. The wind was wild, tearing at our shirts, and for a second it felt like we were the only two people left on Earth. Danny stood near the edge, arms spread like he was trying to fly. Come here, he said, looking back at me. You gotta see this. I walked over, careful. The wind was strong. He didn't say anything, just took my hand again. And for that whole moment, with the salt air in my face and the roar of the sea below, I let myself believe we were something real. Not just summer, not just a phase. Something more. I snapped a photo of him just like that. Eyes closed, face tilted up, our hands locked between us. I still have that picture. Even now, that trip to Point Reyes felt like the closing credits to something we didn't know was ending. When we got back to the city, everything had shifted just slightly, like the volume turned down a notch, the colors a little less saturated. School started again. I actually began going to class. Danny drifted in and out, still showing up at our place, still crashing on the couch or in my bed, depending on the night. But it was different. Or maybe I was just finally realizing it had always been borrowed time. One night, late September, he came over after some protest on campus. He was hyped up, sweaty, talking fast about cops and tear gas and someone throwing a Molotov cocktail. I patched up a scrape on his elbow while he paced the kitchen barefoot. And then, just like that, he stopped moving, leaned back against the counter, eyes on me. You ever think about what we are? He asked. My stomach tightened. All the time, I admitted. He exhaled, looked at the floor. Sometimes I think I'm gonna marry a woman and have kids and live in the suburbs and never tell anyone about this. About us. The silence after that was brutal, like air had been sucked out of the room. I don't want to be a secret, Danny, I said. My voice was low but steady. He nodded, slowly. I know. Then what the hell are we doing? He looked up. Trying. For what? He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, to figure out if I can be this person with you. That wrecked me. Because I loved him, and I think part of me always knew he couldn't stay. He never said I love you. Not in those words. But sometimes, when he looked at me across a room, or when his fingers brushed mine under the table, it felt like maybe he wanted to. And sometimes, that was enough, until it wasn't. The last night we slept together, it was raining. One of those rare California storms where the streets flood and everything smells like earth. He showed up soaked, no explanation, just walked in and peeled off his jacket like it was normal. He kissed me like he'd missed me for years, not days. And when he fell asleep next to me, curled against my back, I knew that was the last time. I woke up alone. No note, no goodbye, just the sound of rain and the smell of him still on my sheets. I didn't see him again that year. It wasn't sudden, not really. More like watching the tide go out and pretending you're not drowning as the water leaves. He just stopped coming by, stopped calling, stopped being part of the rhythm of my days. And I let him. What else could I do? I threw myself into my classes, got serious about design, took long walks to nowhere and back. I told people I was busy, that I was figuring things out. I didn't tell them I was trying not to remember the exact pitch of Danny's laugh, or the way he used to hum songs under his breath when he thought no one could hear. Some nights, I'd sit on the roof with my sketchbook and wait for that knock at the kitchen window. The sound of his boots on the floor, but it never came. A friend said they heard he moved in with some girl across town. Another said he dropped out and was hitchhiking through Oregon. I never asked for details. Didn't want confirmation. The rumor was easier than the truth. By spring, the sheets didn't smell like him anymore. I stopped smoking, cut my hair, graduated with a portfolio full of angles and shadows and lines I tried to keep clean. I got an internship in LA, packed my life into the back of a Datsun that barely made it over the grapevine, and drove south like I was chasing a version of myself that hadn't been built around someone who'd left without a word. But Danny stayed with me, in the half-finished sketches, in the old records I couldn't throw away, in the way I'd still look for him in a crowd, even when I knew it was pointless. I started seeing someone in LA, a guy named Jules who wore press shirts and read the Sunday paper cover to cover. He was kind, thoughtful, steady, safe. But he wasn't a wildfire, he wasn't Danny. And I think he knew it. Because one night after dinner, he looked at me across the table and said, "You don't talk about your past much." I shrugged. Not much to tell. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think you're still in love with someone who didn't love you back." I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. We broke up 2 months later. Years passed. I built a life. Clients, small firm, downtown apartment, plants I only sometimes remembered to water. I dated casually, got close once or twice, but no one ever felt like gravity the way Danny had. No one ever felt like home and danger, all wrapped in the same crooked smile. Every once in a while, I'd still catch a scent in the air, marijuana and motor oil, or hear a Zeppelin riff, and it would all come back so vividly it stole my breath. I didn't chase it anymore. I let it come, let it ache, let it go. Then, in 1986, I got a letter. Hand-written. Sloppy cursive. No return address, just a postmark from Portland. It was from Danny. All it said was, "I saw a guy on the bus reading Kerouac and thought of you. Made me wonder if you're still sketching people in the margins. Hope you are, hope you're okay. Sorry I left like I did. Some days I think about driving back to that house, climbing through the kitchen window, and pretending we're 22 again. But I know better. Still, I miss you. Thought you should know. No phone number, no address, just a memory delivered in ink." I didn't write back, not because I was angry, I wasn't, but because, what would I even say? That I still loved him? That I forgave him? That I'd built a life, and it was fine, and he still lived in the gaps between my days? Instead, I folded the letter and kept it in the sketchbook I'd drawn him in. The one with the sunlit portrait from the roof. I didn't look at it often. Just enough to remember that it happened. That we happened. Time went on, friends got married, some moved away, some passed. I watched the city grow up and out, glass towers rising, where greasy diners used to sit. The record stores disappeared. The street corner where we used to pass joints and stories got paved over into a parking structure. I still had my firm. Still designed buildings that tried to hold beauty without trapping it. Still drank too much coffee. Still walked with my hands in my pockets when I was thinking too hard. Then last year, I got invited to a reunion. College mid-70s crew. I almost didn't go. I wasn't nostalgic for institutions, but something pulled at me, a strange curiosity. It was held in a small venue near campus. The room was buzzing with laughter, and stories worn soft from too many tellings. I wandered through the crowd, half present, sipping warm wine from a plastic cup, until I heard someone say, "Hey, you're Jack, right?" I turned. It was him, older. Hair now salt and pepper, and pulled back in a short, familiar ponytail. A scar on his chin I didn't recognize, but the eyes, still that same stormy blue. "Danny," I said. The name felt both foreign and sacred on my tongue. He smiled. "Didn't think you'd show. Didn't think you'd still exist." I shot back, softer than I meant to. We stood there in the corner, awkward like teenagers again, the years stretching between us like some invisible bridge we weren't sure how to cross. Eventually, we sat down. He told me he'd been in Portland, opened a bookstore, got sober, had a long thing with a woman named Maria that ended a few years ago. Never married, no kids. "Always figured I'd mess them up," he said with a small laugh. I told him about my firm, about LA, about Jules. There was a pause. "You ever settle down?" he asked. I looked at my drink. "Not really." "Me neither," he said. Then he looked at me, and this time it was like the wind off the cliffs again. The air shifted. "You were the only person I ever really loved," he said, plain and simple. I swallowed. Hard. "You had a funny way of showing it," I replied. He nodded. "I was scared. You weren't. You were brave, and I couldn't meet you there. I've been sorry every day since." I didn't say anything, didn't need to. Sometimes apologies are for the person saying them. We talked the rest of the night, caught up, laughed a little. Then the lights came up, and the crowd started thinning. He looked at me, quiet again. "You think we could ever," he started, then stopped. I didn't let him finish. "I think we had our time," I said gently. "And it was ours. And it mattered. But I'm not 22 anymore. And you're not climbing through kitchen windows." He chuckled. "True." He reached out, squeezed my hand. And just like that, the past felt like something I could hold without drowning in it. We hugged goodbye. No promises. No illusions. Just a real, steady goodbye. I walked home that night through the streets of a city that barely remembered us. But I remembered. I always had. That summer in the 70s wasn't perfect. It wasn't even always good. But it was real. It shaped me. And when I think about who I became, I know a big piece of that came from loving a boy named Danny who smelled like smoke and played Dylan on a busted guitar. Now when I sit on my patio with a drink and my sketchbook, I sometimes draw the roof of that old Victorian, the way the light hit it at sunset. The way a pair of knees might have once dangled over the edge. The way a crooked smile could change your life. We were chaos. We were beauty. We were the 70s.